Welcome, everybody, to the Analytical Innovations Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. William Monroe, and today I'm really excited. We have with us Brett Goldstein. He serves as a special advisor to the chancellor at Vanderbilt University and holds a research professorship in the School of Engineering. He's a disruptive innovator. He's known for breaking bureaucratic silos across sectors, from Silicon Valley startups to the Department of Defense. His story is really fascinating, bringing private sector innovation and success into academia and the public sector, and really having big wins in both. His prior roles include the Director of Defense Digital Service, Municipal Chief Data Officer, and CIO for Chicago, and advisor to structured government technology initiatives. Brett Goldstein holds advanced degrees in computer science and criminal justice, and he has his bachelor's in government from Connecticut College. On this podcast, you can expect that we're going to try to get some insights out of Brett. I think he's full of insights from what I know about him and everybody that I know that knows him. And he's got a lot of interesting thoughts about how technology should reshape public institutions and the like. So, Brett, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Will.
So, talk to me a little bit about your journey in the private sector. Kind of what were you doing? What were you doing there before moving to where you're at now?
So where I ended up is really not where I started. I never thought that I would be in the Pentagon in national security. I grew up building a company called OpenTable. And for those of you that don't know it, it's online reservations and computer systems in restaurants. And in '99, a bunch of us built this company. And for 7 years, we built it from a little idea into something that became a multinational. But I lived the Silicon Valley life, and that was me. OpenTable was the thing, and that's where I started. And then honestly, everything changed.
Wow. So I'm just, okay. I was checking. So my uncle owns a stake in a steakhouse in Georgia, which is fantastic, and they're using OpenTable. I was trying to remember. I know I've made reservations with their system before, and I was like, are they using OpenTable? Yep. Sure enough, they are. So yeah, I'm well acquainted with OpenTable, and that's fantastic. So what would you say was that crux where everything changed? I mean, that's kind of a cliffhanger there.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm glad your uncle's using OpenTable. It would have been super awkward if you're like, oh, he hates it.
Not only is he using OpenTable, I believe their steakhouse is listed because OpenTable. One of the interesting things about it is if you rate a restaurant on OpenTable, it's one of the only platforms that kind of ensures that you had a reservation to the restaurant before it allows you to rate the restaurant experience.
Yep.
And so the ratings on there are much more reliable than other platforms where you just have to wake up one day and decide you want to rate that restaurant, right? And so he actually has really nice ratings on OpenTable, so he likes it a lot.
Well, I appreciate his like, and no, that's great. So the whole deal was, so we're building OpenTable, right? Everything's great. It's a startup. We're doing all the things, and along the way, 9/11 happens, and So at that point, I was on the operational side of the business. We had to get installs, we had to get clients, things like that. And I traveled every week. So on 9/11, I was traveling out of Chicago Midway. And I'm on the plane, everything happens, we get grounded, and it was a really powerful day for all of us. And I'm in the airport. We're all watching the monitors, watching CNN, and watch the second tower go down. And it was just one of those moments that was just crushing. And um, I'm driving home because obviously no one's traveling anymore at that point. And I had this epiphany that when I was done building OpenTable, I wanted to have a job that had real meaning. And like OpenTable is great and everything,
Yeah.
but what am I doing? I'm helping rich people make dinner reservations. And I'm like, and this is before we had kids. And I'm like, I want to be able to say, Dad he did more than do well in Silicon Valley. He had an impact. So the funny thing is, and I had this epiphany then that I'm going to do something, but I didn't figure it out for a couple of years. Sure. And so a couple of years later, I'm reading the Sunday New York Times or whatever it was, and there was an article about white-collar professionals being recruited by the NYPD to do counterterrorism work. And I'm like, I'm a white-collar professional, and this sounds really important. And but there was a problem because I can't move to New York because I'm a Red Sox fan. And Red Sox fans don't move to New York because the Yankees are fundamentally evil. Yes. And so what I ended up doing, and this starts just a long story, is a year or so later, the Chicago police offered a police exam. And I'm like, I'm going to take the exam. I like taking tests. I took this. I scored really well. I went through the process over a couple of years. You get a drug test, a psych exam. You have to touch your toes, do all sorts of things. And after eventually year 7 at OpenTable hit, and two things intersected. One, the company was where I needed it to be. We were getting ready to go public. We had grown. We're a multinational. And two, I got an offer to join the Chicago Police Department. Mm-hmm. And so I did one of the crazier things for someone who came out of the Valley world, had multiple graduate degrees. I left OpenTable and I became a Chicago cop. And that started a whole new series of adventures. And then which eventually, over the years, progressed to be a variety of things.
I would totally watch that sitcom. Or it may not be a sitcom, it may just be an act.
Well, it was. So the part when you have 31-year-old me going into the Chicago Police Academy is a sitcom. Because everyone else in my academy class is like 21, 22, whatever. And I'm like the old dude who had never done a push-up. And I'm like, all of a sudden, I'm in an academy class. I'm being barked at by the instructors doing push-ups on a carpet that's probably older than I am, and that was very sitcom worthy.
I would 100% believe it. I think it's very reminiscent of the Nathan Fillion show, The Rookie.
Yeah.
But then also he has the other one where he's I think it's Castle, where he's a writer and he goes in. So it's some intersection between those two, I think. But no, that's fascinating. So you're in the Chicago Police.
Yeah.
I would imagine your advanced degrees help a bit, but I know it's fairly uncommon for somebody that starts out at the bottom of an organization like the Chicago Police and work themselves all the way up into a position like the CIO for Chicago. How do we bridge that gap?
So, one, I didn't tell anyone my background. So they had it in the file because I had a background investigation.
Sure.
But I go to the academy and I don't be like, hey, I went to University of Chicago for computer science.
They would hate you.
Yeah. So I told no one. And I went through the academy and I ended up graduating the top of my class, and I got to pick where I got sent. That's what happens when you're valedictorian. You get to pick what district, what some people might call a precinct. Chicago, they call it district. And this was super controversial, right? My father-in-law was like, you're going to pick the district where there's good food and there's no violence. And I'm like, why would I do that? So I picked one of the most challenging districts in Chicago, the 11th district, West Side Chicago.
Sure.
Historically, lots of challenges there. I went there, and I was a normal cop for a while. Like, I went and I worked a beat. I had a partner. It was just, I did all the things, and no one knew the better about my background. And this was a critical lesson because I spent a year learning about violence and what were the real challenges. And then after a year, some computer system woke up and was like, ding, 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 this dude's got a graduate degree in CS and he has this weird background. And I got overnight transferred to headquarters. And it was just wild. I get this, I'm in the district, I'm on shift, and like the commander's like, you have a phone call from headquarters. And it's like, you're reporting there tomorrow. And so I get sent to headquarters, and I was tasked with bringing mathematics and computer algorithms to identify when and where homicides would occur. So over the progression of the next couple of years, I went from being a beat cop to a commander. So I skipped, I think, 5 ranks. Okay. And I was then in charge of producing packages twice a day that would identify where homicides would occur, and it would use machine learning methods to do that. And that was really a first of its kind. So I spent a couple years doing that, and that was pretty wild. Like, one of the things I'm really proud of, and it was definitely a team effort, is we had the lowest homicides in 40 years. And that's just like, that's impactful. But yeah. At around year 5, I'm like, all right, do I go back to the Valley? What do I do here? Started to have children, and I'd always told my wife 5 years, and I'm thinking I'm going to bounce. But Rahm Emanuel becomes the mayor of Chicago, and Rahm's like, we're going to create a chief data officer position. And because Chicago's going to be number 1 in data. And then he's like, who's this Brett Goldstein guy? And I get called down to transition headquarters, and then I end up being the CDO for Chicago. And then a year later, I ended up being the CDO and the CIO. Okay. So everything I went from beat cop working the West Side to commander to then CDO and CIO.
It's wild how even when you kind of try to hide that you know the answers to the test, or you have experience outside of what the norm is, how that gets found out. I don't know if you experience that in other parts of your life, but I always find it really interesting anytime I've been in a class and I'm like trying to not let everybody know that I'm the computer science guy in a computer science class and everybody else doesn't know, what they're doing. That it doesn't take long. You don't even have to say anything, and people are like, that guy knows. So it's fascinating that caught on. Yeah. Yeah.
The story I love is I had an amazing FTO, field training officer, right?
Sure.
This dude, Rod, the dude knew how to be the police, and awesome guy. We ended up being friends now years and years later. But the thing Rod said to me, he looks at me one day and he's like, you're a Fed. And he's like, you're a plant. Because he's like, you learn the paperwork immediately. Your reports are perfect. He's like, there's something wrong with you. And he just gave me the stink eye. And he's like, you're a plant. And I hadn't fessed up to my background or anything like that, but it was hilarious that Rod called me out.
Yeah. No, that's yeah. there's just something about, like, I don't know, your anxiety level when it comes to things that everybody else stresses out about that is always going to show through, no matter how hard you try not to let it show through. No, that's wild. Yeah, I remember. So I grew up in the northwest suburbs of Chicago in Crystal Lake.
Okay.
If you know where that is.
Yep.
About 5 minutes from Woodstock, Illinois, which is where Groundhog Day was filmed, right? And so yeah, so all the Chicago politics, I'm versed enough in to know who was going through at different times. So that's really neat. That's really neat. So, all right. So you're at Chicago. You moved from CDO to CIO. So how does that? So was it that position of being the CIO that landed you in the Pentagon, or was there another step after
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So after I spent a couple of years working for ROM, and then I got out. So I disappeared. I was in hedge funds for a bit. I did hedge funds. I did some venture capital. I just, I got my academic appointment at University of Chicago. I lived a completely normal out life for a bit. But then in 17, I was in DC for something academic-y, and I get this phone call from the Pentagon and being like, hey, can you swing by? And I'm like, huh? And then I'm like, I have a really awkward question to ask. And they're like, what? I'm like, I don't know where the Pentagon is. And so I end up going to the Pentagon. I met with some folks, and they asked me to be an advisor.
Okay.
And I'm like, huh. And I'm like, I feel like I understand local government, but I don't come from a military family. I have a touch. My dad was in the public health service, but just like barely any knowledge. I really don't understand the federal space, but this got at my itch, which I had years ago. I'm like, as a parent, as a person in the community, I need to do my part. And I had settled into my new hedge fundy VC life, but this really spoke to me. And I'm like, I can be a part-time advisor. That seems fine. So I said yes. And I ended up doing that on a very, very part-time basis. And that, though, evolved. And then by 2019, I was recruited by the Secretary of Defense to run the Defense Digital Service.
Okay.
And that was the first decision hadn't been terribly hard. The second decision was, okay, we're all going to have to move to DC. And this is you're on assignment or on a mission every day, and you're somewhere. And that's a big move for the family. And but spoke to my wife, and my wife and I have been together since college. So like she's dealt with all my nonsense. And we said yes to SecDef. And then we all moved to DC. DDS was this fascinating unit. I like to call it the SWAT team of nerds, where so DDS was composed of some of the best technical talent in the US. So people who would come from the Google and Microsoft, Facebook, whatever it is, and they would sign up for a 2 to 4 year tour. And they'd be a civilian. We'd bring them in, and then we would work on no-fail technical missions. So a good one that we can talk about on the podcast would be Operation Warp Speed. So
okay, sure.
I think most people are familiar with Warp Speed. It was a vaccine mission, and my unit, partnering with the NSA, was tasked with the cyber defense of the vaccine. Okay. And that's a mission where, yes, you need the absolute best talent that we have. you're highly motivated, and there's no room for failure.
Yeah.
So those are the types of things that we would work on at DDS. And it was an amazing experience. I came in, I was there from 19 till I timed out in the middle of 21, and it was intense. It was awesome. I got to travel to all sorts of places I never thought I would go to and work on things that blow my mind.
Yeah, that's wild. So how does the no-fail aspect impact the level of innovation that you're putting into something?
Yeah. So one of the really bad habits we have in government, and I can speak to city and Fed, not really, I don't know state terribly well, is we often start with the reasons we can't do something, right?
Yeah.
There's so many like, oh, no, we don't do that, or no, that's too hard, or no, we can't procure that, or all the reasons, and which are sort of coupled in these phrases which I hate, like good enough for government work.
Sure.
Oof, boy, do I hate that one. Or in technology, government's going to be behind 10 years. Like that's bullshit. Like this just like it doesn't work. So from the no fail perspective, what we would do is we set the outcome. Okay.
Yeah.
This is our outcome, and we are going to get there. And it's one way or another. And it pushes creativity when you agree that we're going to get to yes at the beginning, and we're all going to work it until we find the right way to get to yes. And it's a different mindset. And I don't know if that seems obvious or not, but the world that I entered wasn't always that mindset.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think more often than not, if I were to say like, hey, we're going to have a no fail mindset, everybody is going to be very conservative in how they approach the problems so that they do make an improvement, but it's like an incremental improvement. It's not anything crazy, but they know they can get there. But if I were to say, oh no, it's going to be 10 times better in a year, and people look and it's like, I don't even know how that's possible, but it's like, well, that's what we're going to do. Then yeah, you've got to figure out different paths to that solution. So that makes sense.
So part of it is, and this is a cultural thing, as leaders in this space, we need to be the umbrella to protect our teams. And we need to help inoculate them against the antibodies that come with taking risk. Now, we have a pragmatic reality based on the way the world is structured that we need to take risk and we need to move faster. And a lot of this is as we move from the conflict in Afghanistan to peer competition with the PRC and places like that, we will not keep up and we will not compete if we don't take risks. So you have to introduce concepts of, one I like is fail fast. Like, yeah. I will encourage members of a team, try something that's risky, right? Lawful risk, but risky. Yeah. Make a piece of software. And you want to know what? If it crashes and burns and we have to try and pivot, that is completely fine. But this culture of we're going to write A-level specs and B-level specs and C-level specs and evaluate after 3 years, that doesn't work in this world.
No, it almost sounds like that no fail element is not no fail in the short term. It's no fail for like, we are going to get this done. And so it's okay to have a bunch of mini failures all throughout it in order to get to the big success at the end.
Yeah. And we had, like, I think about missions we ran that we knew, like I'm thinking of one in particular where I think we had 3 days to execute. And you want to know what? There were a lot of failures along the way. And but occasionally it's 2 a.m. and you have to burn down what you're working on and then try something else. And that's okay. It's fighting that culture though of once I pick a path, I have to stay with it. But you're right. You know, there's so many MVP failures, but as long as you get mission success, it's okay.
Yeah, no, that's cool. All right, so you're in the Pentagon. So is it after your tenure at the Pentagon with the Defense Digital Service that you you started working with Vanderbilt?
Yeah. So I had when I entered DoD, I was at University of Chicago. And then when I got out, I thought I was going back to U of C. You know, I went there for grad school. I love the place. I'd return. But the provost at Vanderbilt, Daniel Diermeyer, who I had advised before I went to DoD, had become the chancellor at Vanderbilt. And so I get out of DoD and I'm catching up with Daniel. And he's like, well, you're coming to Vanderbilt. I'm like, oh, but I love U of C. And but he's like, you're coming to Vanderbilt and we're going to build a national security program. And I'm like, I like building new things. And so Daniel had me at we're going to build something new. It's going to be a startup within Vandy. And over the past 4 years, it's been remarkable. It went from early ideas and a couple sort of small research efforts to now we have a booming national security program.
Yeah. So how have you found that attempt to build that bridge and collaboration between academia, government, and industry? What's working?
Yeah. So one, Nashville is just the right place these days.
Yeah.
Like it is, you go on campus and it's just campus is flourishing. The students, the faculty, the partners, the partnerships with the city, there's just everything about Nashville is great. But when you build upon that, there's some secret sauce that we have. And something that the chancellor and I have talked about for a long time is the intersection of policy and computer science. So what I found when I worked in the city, when I was at the police department and at the DoD, is people tended to only speak one language. Like I speak DoD policy, I speak technology, I speak China, all of these things. But Daniel and I have talked about being bilingual for a long time. And I found that where I was successful is my undergrad was government and political science and all that. And I grew up in the liberal arts world. But then at the graduate level, I'm a computer scientist.
Sure.
And my ability to dive deeply into technology, but then speak policy and all of those pieces was this fabulous intersection. So at Vanderbilt, what we found is we have coders who can speak policy and policy students who are learning how to code. And that's been part of our bilingual secret sauce. So as we built this institute and all of these pieces, essentially we're breaking down silos. We're attacking the hardest problems in national security now, like, for example, the Galaxy stuff, which I suspect we'll talk about. And we're making direct impact. And that's been, people now look at Vandy and they're like, you're doing something unique in a way that's getting at that pressing need for that's happening today.
Yeah. No, I mean, that really speaks to me, that whole notion of being bilingual as a tech person. I feel like with most projects, every different discipline you touch, you need to have a translating personality for that discipline in order to be able to really make progress. So if you're doing a medical software thing, yeah, you need your computer science guy, but you need your computer science guy as well who's willing and able to talk to the medical professionals. And then you need a medical professional that's willing and able to talk to the computer science guys. And they need to know, those two guys need to know enough about the other disciplines so that they can have a real conversation. And then you can have medical people on the one side and you can have computer science people on the other side, and the team can be as big as you want. But unless you have those two people that are bilingual, then you're not going to really make as much progress as you want.
Yeah, there's like the world I grew up in had IT departments and things like that. And it was technology really stayed in its box. And I think, as you see as well as I do, that world has changed. So technology permeates everything. And I remember when I worked for SecDef, like he'd be like, come in and help evaluate these things. And then we get at the policy implications, and all of these things have flattened. And our students today need to be well-versed in a variety of different areas to be able to be the leaders of tomorrow. And I think that's really where Vandy excels. And our students are great.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's fantastic. All right, so you touched on the Golaxy documents. Can you describe kind of what they are and what the importance of them are? Because I know I didn't know much about them until starting to get ready for this. So
yeah. So this past April, I received a text message from a researcher I know, and it was a link, and he's like, you need to check this out. And okay, so one, the whole text message made me super nervous because I have issues with links because so many things can happen. So there was a lot of work that had to be done before I could open the link. But and it came from someone who I completely trust. But I eventually see within the link, and there's a whole bunch of PDFs totaling roughly 399 pages in Mandarin. And so I skim through it a little, and I see technical schematics. And I see lots of pictures of people and social media accounts, pictures of people, pictures of US congressmen, all of these different things. And I'm like, okay, there's something here. So I pull in, and this gets at the bilingual piece. So I pulled in my research partner, Professor Brett Benson, which always makes it two Bretts. But he's a political economist, and he speaks Mandarin. He studies, the Indo-PACOM region, deterrence, all of these critical issues. And he and I knew each other, and we enjoy collaborating. But he comes from one specific world, I come from the other, and bringing it together, we often can get an interesting problem. So I pull him in, we start looking at these documents, and to summarize 399 pages in a minute, it is about this company called Golaxy. And what they do, it's a Chinese entity, is they collect what we would call open source intelligence, so OSINT, information you can gather from the public internet. So things that are on Twitter, Instagram, social media, things that are posted. So it collects enormous amounts of information about folks in the world, and then it shapes messaging to be able to influence those folks. So within the documents, it talks about attempts to influence the Hong Kong national security law, the Taiwanese election, all of these critical things that are going on. And it gets into just a level of detail that's remarkable, from creating personas. And what I mean by persona is like a social media account that is not real, right? And so they would create an account, they'd try and make it so it would hide from the blockers or folks that would say this is a bot account, and then generate messaging. And the translation that really got me was to correct the messaging. So they were talking about for targeting folks in Hong Kong who were anti-China messaging, and then they'd produce content to correct them. And at the same time, you see in these documents that there's starting to be collection on U.S. persons. So we saw a large list of U.S. Republican congressmen, all of these folks. So taking from all these documents, coupled with what we could glean from their website, we found that there is years of work that's gone into artificial intelligence methods to be able to create this artificial content to target individuals. But what was really interesting as you see their newer work is integration with DeepSeek to use generative AI. And you start to see where this goes. And this is where Benson and I really studied. You start to see this architecture pointing toward this architecture where individuals can be influenced at that level. So back in the day, when you'd think about the data science here, you would think about creating cohorts of people. Like, Will, you'd be in your age group, you know, you're from this part of the country, things like that. A lot of generalizations, like think for the data nerds out there, like K-mean clusters and things like that. But imagine when you start to build technology that says, I'm going to build a persona that's going to speak to Will directly, and Will's the only person I care about because I need to get Will to do this. And Will's not going to be able to tell I'm a bot. So this took us to, we're entering a world where it's unclear that we're going to be able to tell what is artificial versus what is real. And then you start to have these accounts at the potential like nation state level that are going to influence outcomes. So this was a surge in research. Benson and I posted a guest essay in the New York Times talking about where this sort of influence is going. That opened up a huge discussion. The next day on the front page of the New York Times was a deep dive by Julian Barnes, who's a reporter there, who's also one of our fellows at the Institute, talking about Golaxy, and he did some really deep investigative reporting. And since then, it's just, this project's been front and center, from doing podcasts to briefing Congress to developing research to try and help figure out, like, we have a massive problem coming, and how do we get what we would call left of boom on it?
Yeah, no, I mean that, that's wild. I mean, as a computer nerd, that whole notion that I'm going to, I mean, because essentially what social media has historically done was really readily allow that group level statistics to influence messaging that goes out to different people, right? If you're putting out a Facebook ad, you can very quickly say, I need all people identifying themselves as males on the platform between the age of 35 and 50 that have said that they like monster trucks in the last, the 30 days, and that you can send them specifically a message about a Kiss concert coming to their area, right? Because you've identified that's your profile. But when I can target a technology that has passed the Turing test to you specifically to be just sycophantic enough that it's going to pass through your filters, and then you're going to accept what it says, then I mean, that totally makes sense that it would start to become a massive machine for messaging that can be targeted on an individual level. So that's wild.
It's It's a really complicated period of time now because I'm a huge AI advocate. It's part of my workflow. I have
Sure.
multiple projects which I think are just revolutionary in advancing how we do things. Like back in the day, like I'd have to do like hours and hours of like basic code to start a program, and now I can have one of these give me my structure in about 10 seconds. Like
Yeah.
there's so many amazing things that are happening, but there's this other side, and there's some darkness creeping in, and I'm trying to figure out what is our path where we continue these amazing advances but manage the darkness. And
Yes.
it is pretty scary, some of the things we're seeing in the wild.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy how dark it gets, how fast. I mean, OpenAI just released Sora 2, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't even out there for a day before one of the OpenAI employees posted a picture of Sam Altman, the CEO, robbing GPUs from a target that he made with a platform. And, he posted it as for its comedic value. And it doesn't take a lot of time to figure out it's an AI generated video, but it does illustrate just how dark it can get, how quickly of like, oh, suddenly, maybe I've made my neighbor mad because my dogs were out barking all the previous night, and he wakes up and decides to choose violence and sends a video
Yeah.
of me robbing a gas station to the local police. I don't think that most organizations are equipped to do that filtering of, oh, like this gas station doesn't have any English words on any, it doesn't have any legible text on any platforms. Gas stations, like there's no gas station like that anywhere in this area. All of those sorts of things that you have to do to filter it out as saying like this is AI generated versus not.
Yeah, it's we're entering a tricky period. And I was in Japan last week when this all dropped. And we're getting requests from media for how's this going to play. And candidly, I think video's a little easier than text. But we often, so people talk about the big players, right? They talk about OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, these folks. And, my sense is that they want to prevent harm. They want to help follow the rules. But what the broader world doesn't realize is those are just a few of the players in the frontier space. You go into a place like Hugging Face, and you start to see a lot of alternatives that don't have guardrails.
Yeah, it's the Wild Wild West on there.
Right. And that's why I don't really see this. Will regulatory get at it? I don't know that I see that, because there's this whole other world. So I think it's on academia and the private sector to find techniques where we continue to advance this technology, but we also find ways to make sure we always understand what's artificial and what's real, and have that be generally available. But that needs to be available beyond frontier, and it needs to be available for other tooling. But why this falls into what I would call a wicked problem is you have so many different versions out there, different players, and then the rate of development is one we've never seen. And like, I've been around long enough. Like, I remember the early .com days. I remember a variety of these booms, big data, predictive analytics. You've never seen so many versions so fast at this rate of development. So when you work through the combinatorics in your head, you have a gazillion different people producing these. God knows how many versions. We now need to come together to figure out how do we manage the darkness there so we can all benefit from the advances. So this is complicated.
Yeah. No, I mean that makes a lot of sense. All right, so I know you've got a call coming up, so we probably need to wrap up. But this has been fascinating, and we may need to do a part two at some point for sure. If you could leave the listeners with one insight about the future of national security and innovation, kind of as you see it, what would that be?
Yeah. So I think the headline here is innovation in the national security world is as critical, if not more critical, than any other form of innovation. And I have a lot of, as you know, I spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley. I know that world. It's exciting, but I also spent a number of years in government, in the national security space. And that was truly one of the most exciting experiences of my life. So as people think about, and I'm speaking to folks who are in school, who are mid-career, and want to be in the innovation space, think about these national security problems. Like, there's such a great opportunity to impact and shape and protect the world. And as we talk about AI and ML and generalized computer science and innovation, this is just such a great space to innovate in that you should bring your very best ideas to it. And certainly over at Vanderbilt, we love to hear about new ideas. So I'd encourage you to reach out and talk to us at the Institute.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. So it sounds like there might be two places that people should follow you if they want to keep up with you and connect with you to have further discussions. One would be that Institute at Vanderbilt. And then would LinkedIn be another good place for people to follow what's going on, or is there some other forum that would be better?
Yeah, I'd give you three: the Vanderbilt National Security Institute, and then the Wicked Problems Lab, which if you Google is where we work on some of the hardest problems, and then me via LinkedIn. So I am definitely not Brett Goldstein, the actor, so you can go with the other one on LinkedIn.
All right, sounds good. Well, Brett, thank you so much for your time. This has been a fascinating conversation, and I've really enjoyed it, and I really look forward to how Vanderbilt and the work that you're doing there is going to be shaping national security in the future. So thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Will.